So let's say you've got a Smith & Wesson SD9VE. You go to the range, you fill up your magazines with whatever ammo of choice you have, and then you run into this problem. Fully loaded magazine does not want to seat very easily. There. And then once you get it actually seated in there, then it's dragging so strongly against the underside of the slide that it does not hardly want to rack. It is big pain in the ass. And just to show how bad this is, you can actually see the gouges. If I can get this to focus, you can actually see the gouges that it leaves on the top round. That's how bad this is dragging. It's actually scraping the crap out of the top round and smushing the casing. That's no bueno. What you want is something where you can go like this. Oh, look at that. So much easier. One finger. And then rack it. So much easier. So how do you get from the other problem, this, to this? How does that work? Let me show you. To do this, you'll need 2 or 3 simple things. First and foremost, a couple little files. I've got this kind of triangular shaped one. It's kind of a fine file. And I've got a little round file here. And a little bit of sandpaper, 220, 320 grit, just kind of a fine grit. Not super fine, but not super coarse. Doesn't have to be anything specific. You can do it with just sandpaper by itself and then wrap around a pencil to do this part and that, but you know, this just makes life easier. So anyways, you start out with your factory unmodified magazine. Little button in the bottom here. Poke in the little button, slide the base plate forward. Make sure you keep your thumb over the end so the spring does not go shooting across the room. Voila! Magazine body over here, base plate over here, this little locking tab thing, whatever it's called, whatever, goes over there. Now you have your spring and the top follower. The top end of the spring pokes in this little tiny hole here, so all you gotta do is just kind of maneuver that little booger out of there, like so, as I make it look very awkward. Okay, there we go. And then you have just the follower. Put your thing aside, don't need that now. Now, this is an unmodified original follower. See how we have these nice round parts here? Then you have this at the back here, if I can get this to focus, maybe. If you notice here, there's like a kind of an almost see-through part to the back side of the follower here, where this plastic right in here is very thin. It's got like an over molding, like a, from the molding process, there's like flashing around in here. So it's excess material, and what's happening is when you have this in the magazine and you have it fully loaded, this is squishing down, and then this limits its travel. These little nubs all along here, they bottom out on this part at the bottom, and so that's limiting how far it can travel downward. That's half of the problem. The other half is the spring. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, as far as the follower itself, this one here that I have is a modified follower that I've filed on. Now all I've done here, if you can see the difference between the two, all I've done is filed this one down, these 2 round nubs. I've kind of filed them down a little bit, maybe about, oh gosh, I'd say 1/16 of an inch, not 1/8 of an inch, just very little, because you don't want to go too far. But filed those down, and these little 2 feet pegs, whatever, on the back, I've kind of smoothed them out. On see on this one, comparing the two, trying to get this thing to focus here. So I've taken off the extra flashing around the edges, the sharp edges, all that. That's all smoothed out and filed down. Now when you're modifying the follower on here, after you've filed everything down, you've kind of flattened out this little part here and milled off a little top there. You want to clean up all of the rough edges. Like, see, you got here, this one I've just done. See all those little rough spots on there? I'm going to take a little bit of sandpaper and just kind of smooth those out, just so the springs don't have anything to catch on, because you don't want the magazine follower to catch on the spring, and then you end up with a, you know, misfeeding and hang-ups and all that kind of thing. It's just not cool. So the first half, as I said, is modifying the follower. Once you've filed that down and you've reassembled it, the second half is how you load it. Now normally you just poke in 16 rounds. This one is fully loaded, as you can see here. You just poke in your 16 rounds and slap it in the pistol, and there you go. Only problem is the spring, as I showed you earlier, that way the top end fits inside the bottom part, as it compresses and that top part's going inside the lower half, these little coils kind of bunch up and they kind of overlap and hang up on each other a little bit. So what happens is, I mean, obviously with this follower not being modified, you've only got just a tiny, about, gosh, not even a 1/16 of an inch hardly to move up and down. When you've modified the follower, you have more room to go up and down, but you have to kind of line everything up. That's why I suggest what I call squinching. I don't know, squishing, whatever the word is, if there's an official word for it. But basically just getting everything to settle down. You just, after you've loaded your 16 rounds, just kind of push down a few times, and that helps everything settle into position down here in the bottom. So all those little ridges of the spring kind of fit into place. And you'll notice, versus, you know, when you first have 15 rounds in there and you put in that 16th round, it's real tight at first, but if you give it a couple little, you can feel it actually loosen up as everything kind of settles into place there. So now it's a lot easier. So then, when you go with your closed slide, boop, a lot easy. Boop, one finger. Boop, boop, as opposed to old school. There. Much better. So there you have it. Simple fix. Doesn't cost you anything. Just a couple minutes of time and knowing how to load your mags. So, for what it's worth, that's, I guess, a fix. Thanks for watching. Trying to demonstrate how this stacks up. It's kind of hard to do, but basically as the spring compresses, as it's fully loaded, it squishes down and those smaller coils on top fit down inside of the larger coils like so, and then this shoots across the room and damn near gets me in the eye.